Next speaker up is Rob Massa. So Rob is the CRO at Forecast. His title of his talk today is The Importance of Leadership During the Toughest Times, which I think is a great title. The value of showing empathy is something he's going to touch on alongside leadership in general difficult times, as we all tend to talk about leadership highs rather than the lows. Rob is reasonably new to Forecast, so I think he joined last year, was it? Yeah, the beginning of last year, so just around COVID times, having previously held roles at BounceX as their GM of EMEA and Opt Intelligence as well. Rob, come on up. Thank you.
Is this thing on? There we go. Just want to thank James, Owen, the rest of Sales Confidence, all the sponsors, and of course, the rest of our amazing speakers. Honored to be a part of this lineup here. So I network frequently with many sales leaders, and one of the things I find interesting is generally when you ask them how things are going, it's always, we're smashing our targets, we're crushing our quota. It's never been better, our growth's crazy. And it's interesting because I actually, I read a survey recently from HubSpot that, where they surveyed, I think, 500 sales leaders. And out of the 500 who responded, 40% of them said that they actually missed their annual target last year. Yet, when you speak to sales leaders, they're always talking about how great everything's going. So I think it's interesting because the hardest times are the times that we learn the most. And when you're thinking about how you can learn from your mistakes, learn from your failures, go through a rough patch and really come out better on the other side, those are the times that actually make us leaders. And those are the times that actually make us better. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about tonight, I wanted to talk about leadership, but I also didn't want to necessarily talk about it from just a positive lens, but also like sometimes on the negative lens, and when things are not going so well. Because I think over the last 20 months or so, when things kind of turned itself on its head, many of us went through challenges that we probably never thought we would face. New obstacles came up each and every day. We had to think about things like having to build a new team remotely, having to make sure that our team's mental health was okay when you're not really with them all day. And just in general, how do you take that culture that you had and actually replicate that virtually? And those are things we just never really thought about. So I was thinking, how can we, or I, kind of spread what we've done to just make sure that the leadership is going well when you don't really know and don't really have a full heartbeat on what's actually going on. So how many people over the last 20 months, if you want to raise your hand, feel like you hit a little bit of a rough patch? And how many people feels like you're having a rough patch right now? And how many people feel like when you've hit a rough patch and you're in this new whole working environment where some people are in the office, some people are out of the office, it's been a little bit more difficult? And that's, I think, what really makes leadership great, as weird as that sounds. We need to think about how we can step up in these situations when you have a team that's partially in the office, partially remote, and you don't really have a full idea of like what's going on and when. So it's interesting because right now I would say there's never been a time where there's been more VC money flowing around, ever, with valuations that are astronomical. And what does that do to us? What does that do to people like us? It increases expectations. It puts higher targets on our shoulders and gives us a lot more stress. And when you have more stress, your team has more stress. So it's very difficult to manage, especially when you're not all necessarily in the office all day together. So what I really wanted to kind of hone in on is how you deal with that with your team and really call out 4 main themes that I use to get through some of these harder times that we have. And that's whether you're trying to figure out how to make sure that you guys have enough pipeline to meet your quarterly number. Sometimes when win rates go down, what's going on? Your team morale is obviously going to go down a little bit. How do you build them up? How do you get them back to where they should be? And these 4 key themes for me have really helped out. And I would say that it's something that I definitely didn't always do, but something now that I've kind of learned just through the thick and thin to really start building on to make sure that I can understand both how I can build up my teams, both mental health and confidence through some of the tougher times. So the first one is taking responsibility. So how do you take responsibility in front of your team to let them know that it starts with you? If you're the leader and you feel like your team has a downturn, it starts with you. So you need to take responsibility. What that also does is it takes a little bit of pressure off of them. It gives them a little bit more confidence that it starts with you. The second thing is just being totally transparent about the situation. It's okay for things not to be perfect all the time. And I think sometimes we go through these journeys at these SaaS companies and feel like everything always has to be perfect. But in reality, that's very rarely the case. So it's okay to acknowledge the imperfection. It's important to provide that transparency. It's important to really answer these 3 main questions. What improvements are we making? And what decisions have we made to make them? What is leading to this downturn, or what is leading to these problems? And then most importantly, what is the path forward? And what is the crystal clear picture that's gonna essentially move the needle and turn things around? And the crystal clear picture is the most important thing, because what that will do is it'll turn your team from thinking about the negative into, okay, let's look to the future, to the positive. And here's exactly how we're gonna do it. And I know that my leader knows exactly what's happening and what's going on, and this is the way that we're gonna make it happen. So be transparent. The third one, and this one I would say is more of, I would say more relevant for the whole hybrid working model, but just over-index on enablement. I think enablement in this atmosphere right now is huge. You need to get your team doing role plays. You need to get your team doing, everyone getting together and listening to calls. It's more important than ever, because right now, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I know my team's not in the office every day. So how are people listening to other people speak on the phone? It's more important than ever to get them together and get them engaged with one another, especially during a downturn, to see how they can improve. So over-index on enablement. And then lastly, it might sound cliche, but show empathy. Empathetic leaders, studies show that empathetic leaders cultivate the best relationships with their team. So show empathy. It's acknowledge that it's okay to miss a quarter. Everybody misses a quarter. That's why we have targets. That's totally okay. And what that does is it almost creates a little bit of vulnerability on your side to make your team members know that you feel it with them and that you're right there with them, and that they don't necessarily need to feel the pressure, although they still do, of missing a quarter. So take responsibility, be transparent, over-index on enablement, and show empathy. Thank you.